one of the greatest American researchers. This guy is unique. Once you know him, you can't let him go for 20 years. So we're stuck with this man, and he's the greatest. Sean David Morton.
Welcome to the Alchemy Event. Thank you so much, David. Big hand for David. Thank you, David. We're just going to rock and roll to this whole thing. Everybody okay? Tell me, okay, Barack Hussein Obama, I'm sorry, Barry Soetoro, I'm sorry, Harry Brunel, I'm sorry, Tony D. Tiger is re-elected. Apparently the American people think everything's fine and nothing has changed. Nothing changed. Isn't that great? Nothing changed. $5 billion were spent in the election. The Congress did not change it all. They picked up one Democratic senator, and Barack Obama wins by a landslide. So everybody thinks everything's just fine. Isn't that great? And let me see, I let a lady take care of my house, and then lets my cat out and gets run over by a car. And then UCLA beats USC, and I get a cold actually standing in the pouring rain watching those people beat the crap out of my football team. So you can't tell me the apocalypse isn't right around the corner. So it's my radio program on Revolution-Radio. Actually, this is the old one, so it's not on AFR, which stands for Amazingly Freaking Retarded, actually, .com. But I'm on Revolution Radio now. And thank you, my entire radio audience showed up tonight. Thank you so much. Every single week. I just toured Europe with Carrie Cassidy. She can't be here tonight. This was my poster. I won the poster contest for the Sean Notes of Carrie Cassidy Europe trip. At the bottom, that's Carrie at the top. So I thought it was hilarious. She did not find anything to apparently Carrie's at some conference in Pennsylvania where they have Stephen Greer, Stephen Bassett, Carrie, David Wilcock. So I'm not sure what I'm sure the criteria was you had to for the criteria for this conference in Pennsylvania. It's apparently particularly irritating. So to go to that conference. All right, wait enough time to goof around. All right, it was the final dark days of World War II. Scientists in the Nazi Third Reich embarked on one last desperate attempt to infiltrate the Allied forces, a long-term conspiracy to conquer the world and establish the Fourth Reich. Diabolically evil German genetic engineers hatched one last insidious attempt at world domination by transferring the consciousness of the Nazi high command into cats that look like Hitler. Ladies and gentlemen, yes. These terrible ossified felines under Operation Pussy Clip began to infiltrate this country. And as they infiltrated our country, becoming our pets, becoming our friends, and pooping in boxes, chewing the food. These guys that look like Hitler have now moved into every section of our government, every section of our society, causing the amazing Nazi pussified Reich to take over the entire world with their totalitarian Once the American secret government discovered this dark, dire, and diabolical plot, scientists at Area 51, along with the genetic researchers at the Dulce Mesa, using back-engineered alien technology, came up with the only way to conquer this seemingly unstoppable force. Dogs that look like Hitler. Yes. So, once upon a time, on a planet called Gaia, Urantia, or simply Earth, you folks have all seen this in the media, and I'm just going to blaze through a lot of this stuff here because sort of towards the end of this, so I'm just going to show you a bunch of various photographs, but there are people still telling us that this massive disaster is going to be upon us. Here's a little Easter egg for you, by the way. In the movie 2012, you can't see it in here because it's so bright, but in the movie 2012, this is the, really? That's not working now either? No, nothing works here.
Mercury retrograde.
Anyway, yeah, Mercury retrograde, typical. Yeah. In the movie 2012, that's the White House, and it's interesting that Danny Glover, he was there, thank you. Danny Glover is actually standing on the steps of the White House, and the battleship that actually comes in and wipes out the White House is actually the USS John F. Kennedy. So, just a mild little Easter egg for you there. You can turn some of the lights back on, because now I can't see it all. And that's Southern California. There's my house, actually, right there. Falling into the ocean. lights back on, seriously.
Once they turn off, I think it takes like 15 minutes.
And Sean said, let there be light.
Yeah, you guys can turn the lights back on. The only thing that we learned actually from most of what the media is telling us, and if you saw the movie 2012, which was in 2010, is that we can survive the apocalypse if only we all possess a Winnebago and a limousine, apparently. So as they drive through the streets of downtown Los Angeles. That was actually taken yesterday at Compton, actually. So, all right, we're coming up with the Mayan calendar. I don't explain the Mayan calendar here. You guys all know the Mayan calendar. I just think it's interesting that Barack Obama took the time with President Sensei Fox to actually propose, and I think there's a remarkable resemblance, don't you? Between seriously, you turn the lights on, really. I'm afraid.
Nobody knows how.
I'm
telling you.
It takes like 15 minutes for them to come back on.
Yeah, it takes 15 minutes to
away.
Okay. Michelle, how many good? Okay, for those of you that don't think that the election was rigged, anybody here think the election was rigged? When Jimmy Carter, who has actually refereed elections in Panama, Afghanistan, and some of the most corrupt countries in the world, when Jimmy Carter comes out and tells you that the most corrupt political system on earth is the United States, you should probably listen to what he has to say. And just to prove that this election was massively rigged, I'm not sure if you saw this or not, but this was on an episode of People's Court, and on CBS in Arizona. This aired October 17th of 2012. Yes, that's before the election. And you will see at the bottom it says Obama, Democrat, 42,237,966, 43% of the vote. Romney, Republican, at I can't read actually what it says right there on the bottom, but I believe it says 40,116. It has Barack Obama at 43%, Romney at 40%, with 99% of the precincts actually in. And this aired on television as a crawl on October 17th, 3 weeks before the election.
Aired.
Yes, exactly. So the teleprompter knows all. Very much like the British reporter standing in front of WTC-7 on 9/11 saying, "Oh, the horror, the terror, that WTC-7 has the Salomon Brothers building has collapsed," and it's right behind it, of course, you know. So the teleprompter knows all. Now, let me give you some inside stuff on this. To give you some legitimate sources on what's going on. I'm not talking about Drake or people that or Bill, what was his name? Woodcock, Grove, Worm. Who was the person that Kerry was interviewing?
Brock Brader.
Bill Broadbrader. I'm talking about people that I've known for 30 years that played golf with George Tenet, that were best friends with General David Petraeus and General Alexander. And what's happening now is a coup of sorts inside the White House and the military. The military is really angry, and they know that the election was stolen. They know that from what's going on in the outset, you have to realize what's really happening with David Petraeus and General Alexander now. Remember, Petraeus was head of the CIA, and do you not think it's ironic that David Petraeus, who is head of the CIA, which is a massive organization that is designed to keep the secrets of his country, that he can't keep a secret about the fact that he's actually seeing this woman, Paula Broadwell, who might as well just be named Pussy Galore or Holly Goodhead or something, or some other Bond girl, I would think. Because when Petraeus actually went to the president and resigned, you have to understand that he gets no pension now. He's cut off. And by him admitting to this, he can possibly face charges of adultery. I'm going to turn the lights on.
It takes 15 minutes to calm down. I don't know what happened.
Okay, all right. The lights, okay. I mean, it makes the tape useless and creates a whole series of problems. But you guys can see it's all fine. All right, look. In conversations that I've had over the last 2 weeks with this gentleman, it was the first time that I have ever heard the word junta actually used by this man. And it was the first time where I was being told the military does not approve of Barack Obama. They are working on a smooth transition of power, that we should very much watch what happens to Joe Biden, because he is to be replaced apparently fairly soon. Biden is going to give some excuse about reasons for his health or to spend time with his family. As you know, Biden was in a car accident some time ago that killed members of his family several years ago. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Now, when he told me, let me tell you what's going on behind the scenes, and I said, no sir, let me tell you. And I said, you can agree with me or not. What's happening is that Ambassador Chris Stevens in Libya, what he was doing, and we've learned this now, and if you've listened to my radio program, I've been talking about this ever since it happened. I was telling you that the 9/11 attacks on American positions in Libya and across the Middle East, that this entire thing about a videotape called The Innocence of the Muslims, that nobody had ever seen, was a complete fraud, was a total hoax. That what was happening was this was a concerted attack on an outpost, not an embassy, not a consulate, but basically a safe house in Benghazi, where the United States had actually captured 2 of the rebels. Now this is where it gets very strange. You have to understand the politics of what's happening here. When George Bush came in, George Bush replaced most of the people at CIA and the State Department with right-wing leaning, pro-Israeli, fundamentalist born-again Christians. Okay, you with me? Now, Barack Obama would be, let's say, the opposite of that. Okay? So we now have the entire intelligence community, most of the people at State and most of the people at CIA, who are actively operating to, let's say, thwart the agenda of this president. This president's agenda is, because he doesn't really care about anything else other than signing executive orders. The Congress has passed 4 major pieces of legislation in the last 4 years. Barack Obama has signed into law 943 executive orders. 943 on immigration, on drones, on internet secrecy. He has to be able to take over the internet anytime, anywhere, any place, so that the president can contact somebody on the phone whenever he needs to. That was the excuse that was given for the internet bill. The National Defense Authorization Act, which was gutted by a federal attorney in New York, Judge Catherine Forrest, Obama now has the temerity of saying, when she said it's unconstitutional, it violates posse comitatus, it is completely anathema to the rule of law in this country, and Obama actually has the nerve to appeal this ridiculous piece of legislation, and so appeals are underway. Now, one other piece of good news for you is, for those of you who've been through the airport, anybody had to go through what they call the porno scanners at the airport? Anybody actually had, come on, really? You don't go through the thing where you stand up like this? Everybody has to go through this, right? Yeah, well, thank you for always refusing. What's that? Yeah, we refuse those. You know, because I like the personal touch of being felt up by an actual person. So it's, because TSA, which actually stands for touch someone's ass, I think, so, we were all under the DHS, the Department of Human Sacrifice. I mean the Department of Homeland Security. And here's the interesting. Janet Napolitano is the director of DHS. Janet Napolitano is sort of a pernicious midget lesbian.
You don't need to get
that,
just plug it in the light.
that actually now is responsible for the nuclear football, because the military does not allow Barack Obama to actually carry nuclear launch codes. You know why? Because the Joint Chiefs of Staff said we're not going to trust the nuclear capabilities of this country from somebody to someone that's not a citizen of the United States. And I heard this from a Secret Service agent in Canada, who was a very hot woman, by the way. Apparently Janet Napolitano tried to hump her leg or something, and so she just gave her the old Heisman straight arm. And but they had to come up with all this extra security because of the one person thought that was funny. The extra security to actually provide for the nuclear football, because Napolitano, the head of Homeland Security, is the one that carries it around. So back to Obama's agenda. The only thing that Obama has done actually in his presidency, besides passing some executive orders, is he writes on legal pads, 11 by 14 legal pads, because the President of the United States does not know how to type. He knows how to text, but he doesn't know how to type. Probably because he flunked out of Occidental College here in California, probably because he never actually went to Columbia, probably because he got a free ride and can't get his college records anywhere from Harvard. But we did get a Social Security card. I think Barack Obama looks remarkably good for a 137-year-old white man from Connecticut, don't you?
Right.
So anyway, the bottom line is he writes chapter and verse on these notepads about how he wants to subvert governments in the Middle East and subvert these governments and replace them with radical Sharia law Muslim regimes. And that is what you have seen happen with the support of the United States in Tunisia, in Libya, in Egypt, and moving forward in the battle that's going on in Syria. Now, World War III might conceivably be happening as we speak in Syria, because the Russians have drawn a line in the sand where Vladimir Putin, who is a Russian Orthodox Christian.
So he said, let the kilo.
Straight to Puerto Rico. She saw her boyfriend's head. You're the master of production, aren't you? Yeah, Willie Streamer's appearing later on. So we prepared this just for him. So. Alright, so bottom line, let me wrap this portion of it up. What's happening is that the President of the United States has one agenda, the military has another agenda, and what was going on is that Ambassador Stevens was running guns through Libya, through Turkey, into Syria to back the rebels that are trying to topple the Assad government in Syria.
Here comes the light. Here comes the
Assad
light.
government in Syria. By the way, the Russians have drawn a line in the sand. They're saying that they will not allow this government to fall because they feel if Assad's government actually does fall, that they will put 16 million Christians to the sword, which Barack Obama has no problems with, apparently. By the way, he's the first president of the United States to actually bow to the King of Saudi Arabia, and it's against Sharia law to ever take your wife on business trips anywhere. So, oddly enough, he actually left his wife home, not home, but when they traveled Europe, he left her in Paris, while he actually went to the Middle East. And by the way, he's in Asia right now, and Benjamin Fulford has some interesting things to say about that. But let me just show you what, I'm going to blaze through this because I've only got about an hour, but obviously you guys have probably seen the various codexes and plates of the Mayan calendar. Each one of the codexes or the plates of the calendar talk about things that are going to happen in that particular year. They give energy to a god or a force of nature as represented by the gods in these various platelets. This is the best of the codexes that have been preserved, also known as the Dresden Codex. There were 4 Mayan calendars, or Maya calendars that were left, and they've just found another stele, actually, which is kind of interesting. This other stele actually extends the calendar well into about the year 4,900 or so. And so let me just show you something kind of fun and interesting. Now, I've joked for quite some time that if you look at this, which is the last plate of the calendar, I've joked for some time on the last plate of the calendar here that there you see at the bottom, you see a sky serpent here at the top. Sky serpent here at the top that creates massive flooding or chaos. Let me just give you some interesting things about this last aspect of the calendar. So here's the sky dragon, that's spewing out black brackish water here, which represents massive storms and rains and floods. And you can pretty much point out that 2012 has been exactly that. What did you think? We've got millions of people who have been displaced. You have Italy completely underwater. You've got Florence and most of Tuscany underwater. New York is underwater. And so here we have this blackish, this water dragon here. And it is interesting that we're in the Chinese year of the black water dragon. In the year 2000, it was the golden metal dragon. Now in this year, we're in the year of the black water dragon. And these two symbols underneath on the underbelly of the dragon were 2 events. And these events were the transit of Venus, which is of course June 5th and 6th. And then the question was, this is an eclipse, depending on which way you read the dragon, either this way or back this way. Here we now have an eclipse, and there were supposed to be events that were going to occur between these 2 energies, if you will. Now we've had 2 eclipses this year, 2 remarkable eclipses. And these remarkable eclipses have been on May 20th and of course November 13th. The eclipse that we've had on May 20th, we had a huge conference up in Mount Shasta that about 500 people showed up for. That was the first time in 26,000 years that we've had an alignment of the sun and the moon in an annular eclipse, where the eclipse literally looked like a snake, or an Ouroboros, which is a serpent, a symbol for eternity, a serpent actually swallowing its own tail, which is what the sun actually looked like, because it was an annular eclipse. It didn't totally cover the sun. And it was directly aligned with the constellation of the Pleiades. Now the Pleiades is immensely important for the ascension of mankind, because the Pleiades it looks to us like 7 bright stars that look like sort of a question mark. But it is in fact about 200 very old blue-white stars that consist of a part of our galaxy that is central not only to our development, but the star Alcyone, which is the central star in the Pleiades. Our solar system, actually in our little eddy, our little corner of the 4th arm of the Milky Way galaxy, we actually rotate around Alcyone. That's actually the central star in this neck of the woods, so to speak, as we then, the entire galaxy then rotates around the center core, the light-year across black hole at the center of the galaxy. We then rotate around Alcyone. Every single time we have major alignments with the constellation of the Pleiades, there are massive upliftings, massive ascension points in human history. So, if you look at the Baktuns, actually on the calendar itself is divided up, or the ages, if you will, of the 13th, the 12th, and the 11th, because we're reaching the end of the 12th Baktun right now. But each Baktun is about 400 years, and then divides up the greater calendar, which is about 5,100 years and change or so. And if you go back 400 years from 400 years back from this, you come to about 1619 or so, going back to that. And it's interesting because the Maya, well, I'm sorry, so if you go back 400 years to about 1619, the Maya had fought the Spanish for 100 years. And finally, on this date of the shift of the 400-year Baktun, the Maya simply came to the Spanish and said, or the Maya that were left that had been revolting, came to the Spanish and simply said, we will stop fighting you now, you can do whatever you want, we are ready for the change to occur. And this was at the end of the Baktun. Now in a lot of these Baktuns, the Mayans have simply abandoned their cities, by the way, because then if you go another 400 years back from that, you come to the sort of end of the 12th century, and now you have you can actually see that this is the beginning of the Crusades in Europe, a massive shift between what was sort of a peaceful relationship between Christianity and Islam. It was the end of a 300-year Muslim golden age in Europe at that particular time. That was all run from Cordoba, Spain, which a lot of my book, The Dark Prophet, is all about. But you go back 400 years before that, now you come to the end of the Mayan classical period. Now you come to the period of time where Chichen Itza is completely abandoned. You go 400 years back from that, you come to about 435 AD or so. And it's interesting, at the end of that Baktun, you now have the beginning of the Arthurian age in Europe. You have King Arthur, you have Merlin, you have the Knights of the Round Table. You have the search for the Holy Grail, which is an idea that you have the Knights of the Round Table of cooperation, you have the Britons actually fighting the Anglo-Saxons, you have all these sort of wars that have broken out because you've had the collapse of the Roman Empire. And at that point, when Merlin and Arthur, and actually in the real story, if you throw out the Mists of Avalon and you throw out all of the seedy white stuff and all that, but if you actually look at the true history, Arthur was a man by the name of Owain Dontuin, and Owain Dontuin was a former Roman soldier. And Merlin, oddly enough, if you actually look at the true records, and a lot of these are actually survived in Ireland, in an area called in a library called the Kells in Dublin, which saved civilization because Ireland was never conquered by the Romans. Therefore, these libraries actually continue to exist there because their language existed, the libraries existed. So as Rome collapsed, the Irish literally saved civilization. But if you look at the Kells there, you'll find that Merlin was in fact a man by the name of Ambrosius Aurelius, who was the great-great-grandson of Marcus Aurelius. If you ever watched The Gladiator, Marcus Aurelius, who was the great king. And Guinevere was Merlin's daughter, and he married Merlin to Arthur, or Owain Dontuin, and established a bloodline, which was, and to make a long story short, that bloodline was then reestablished on the British throne with the introduction of Princess Diana, who was actually from the House of Spencer. And the Spencers, by the way, were directly connected to the House of Wessington, and the Wessingtons came to this country and changed their name to Washington. And actually the crest of the Wessington House became the flag of the United States. The actual crest of the house was a blue field with stars with red and white stripes that then became the U.S. flag. George Washington's father is actually buried in the same crypt. He's 2 bodies over from where Princess Diana is buried. So there's all an interconnection of this. Actually, if you look at a dollar bill, take a look at a dollar bill, take a look at George Washington's face, and compare it to Prince William, and they are the spitting image of one another. Now, Prince Harry, I don't know where he came from, but it's writing instructor's kid or something. But it's, back when Charles was wearing underpants on his head, whatever. So the only reason I mention that is because, I'm sorry, and then you go back another, because that's 435, but then you go all the way back to the end of the other back ton, and you come to 42 AD, which is the beginning of Christianity, which is basically Paul, who has his epiphany on the road to Damascus. Am I talking fast for you guys?
No, William is going to be a king, right?
Sorry, what?
William is going to be a king.
I believe so. And again, I think that the reestablishment of the House of Spencer, and you have to understand the history and the mysteries of the Rosicrucians, the whole Rosicrucian mystery and a lot of the stuff that the Masons are talking about relates to the mystery of America. And in the same kells that I'm talking about, there's 2 really interesting books. There's the Voyage of St. Brennan, and there's the voyage, the Great Adventure and the Voyage of Maldwin's Boat. And Maldwin is the Celtic pronunciation of Merlin, which is in the Welsh. And Merlin actually means he of the eagle vision, he who can see like an eagle. So it was a title, very much like Arthur was a title. Arthur meant the bear-like one, meant he who fought like a bear. Merlin was the one who could see the patterns of reality. And for those of you that don't think that Merlin might have been a prophet or might have been able to see the future, in these 2 books, the story of St. Brennan and Maldwin's Boat, they talk about a journey that they take in 510 AD, where they actually go to an island of giant sheep called Fjord. Then they go to an area where they say that they see volcanoes and lava, and they thought it was the land of the Norse gods. Then they go to an area which they say has green beaches. Then they come across and they say that there were giant crystals in the water, which were icebergs, and they talk about a voyage from the northern part of Ireland up through an island where we now found prehistoric giant sheep. Then they go to Iceland, which is where all the volcanoes are. Then they go to Greenland, which is salt Greenland, because Greenland has malachite all along the beaches. The beaches are green. Then they come down through Maine, and they come all the way down to Virginia, where they find apples and tobacco and all these really interesting things. And Merlin has a vision in the book, and this is what's really interesting because now a lot of the Rosicrucian knowledge is that Merlin is in fact buried here in America, actually off the coast of Maine somewhere, an island called Merlin. Merlin's island is where he was buried, and they believe that the true Holy Land, that the second land that would be inherited was the United States. And because it was two Masonic obelisks, the great obelisk of the Washington Monument, the earthquake last year in 2011. If you take that monolith, and then you take the other monolith, the Masonic monolith that was built in Boston, there's one at Bunker Hill that's a brown monolith, and the other one is a white monolith that's built in Washington, D.C. These 2 monoliths represent the white and the black gate to the entrance to the Temple of Solomon. Now, Merlin had a vision, and in this vision, he said he fell asleep in the boat, and in these lands to the west beyond the sea, he was met by a giantess. This is 510 AD. He was met by a giantess, and this giantess had a toga, and the toga that she wore was clasped and held on by a single brooch, and in this she held a lamp that had liberty. I'm not even kidding, this is 510 AD, and he met this woman who said, enter, enter the land of liberty, the land of grace, the land of plenty, for we are the lands of magic beyond the seas. And this was his prophecy, which exactly described 510 AD what structure? The Statue of Liberty. And not only the Statue of Liberty, but if you draw a line between the 2 pillars of the gates, exactly at the exact center is the Statue of Liberty, between the Washington Monument and the Boston Monument on Bunker Hill, which is the entrance to the new Holy Land. So this bloodline that has been placed upon the throne, now will be placed upon the throne. This is why so many people think that Charles will never sit upon the throne of England, that they will bypass him somehow and put William directly on the throne, because whoever he is, because he's a bloodline of the House of Spencer, and I can trace this all the way back to Elizabeth, Queen of Bohemia, but it's a whole bunch of British history, you don't want to hear it. But It had to do with this, with Penelope. Penelope should have sat on the throne, but instead they put James I on the throne. So James I, because she was the older sister, and she was the true bloodline for the throne, but they always put the first male heir on the throne. So he set his sister up with the Duke of Spencer, which became the House of Spencer, which is now how the bloodline always traces all the way down. And it's believed that the British will now, at some point, begin a new monarchy where a person with the power of Merlin or the foresight of Merlin will finally sit upon the British throne. And as many of you know, if you've heard me throughout the years, I have this whole theory that the next messianic figure, the Messiah that's predicted by the Great Pyramid of Giza, is going to be born in Stonehenge, or it triangulates at Stonehenge, but I'll show you that in just a second. The reason this is so interesting here is because we're now at the very end of this. And I joked about, well, you know, the character at the bottom, there's Barack Obama at the bottom, and there's Hillary Clinton on his back going, you suck, I'm going to be president in 2016. And then, you know, there's Michelle, you know, looking very dapper in her, whatever, you know. She doesn't have the good forearms, though. I would think she'd probably have better guns. That was Michelle there. But here I'm joking that Obama is conjuring a storm. And it's exactly what happened with the election. If you look at what happened with Hurricane Sandy, and isn't it weird that a hurricane named Sandy dumps tons and tons of sand on entire areas of New York City? And I have some advice for people in New York City. I had dozens of students of mine when I was teaching remote viewing classes in New York in 95, 96, 97, 98. The one question that I always thought was fun when I taught my viewing classes there was I would write a question and put it in an envelope so nobody could see it. And I would give them a coordinate. This is how we teach remote viewing, is you give somebody an address in time and space, which is like 2842 gamma or aqua or omega or whatever. It's something that's completely nonsensical for the target. And I put the target up on the board in an envelope so nobody could see it, and it was a question. And the question was, describe New York City in the year 2015. These are all recorded, all on record, and everyone had a mass dream of the future. Everyone had the exact same thing. When they came to New York, they said that New York, huge sections of the city, this is from 95 to about 2000 or so. No one saw the World Trade Centers. Nobody. Everybody saw that New York was flooded. Everybody saw that the subways aren't working, that the sewers began to break, that the water levels were beginning to rise, and that slowly over a period of time, this is 2015, mind you, that over a period of time, the city was being evacuated. And it was being evacuated out into New Jersey and into upstate and all these various areas, and that much of New York, specifically downtown, had become a ghost town without power. These people were calling me on the phone, calling the radio show, writing me letters, going, oh my God, this is exactly what we saw. And I started telling them, then you better start thinking about getting out, because these storms are going to get worse, worse, and worse. And by the way, the one thing that we saw was massive flooding of the subway systems. And what was going on was not the rain and the storm, but as we had a full moon with the storm actually coming in, the water had risen to such a point that the ocean was pouring into the hole of where the World Trade Center used to be, and they said it looked like Niagara Falls. And it was coming in through that area, and this was another reason why I have been talking for years, saying that unless they demoed the World Trade Center straight down, that if one of the centers had actually fallen into the other building, that the building would have popped up and you would have had the East River rushing into the hole, and you would have killed 250,000 people on the subways. And I've been saying this for all this time, which is another reason why they demolitioned the World Trade Centers both straight down. And all the explosives that were there to do it were actually placed there by Marvin Pierce Bush, who was responsible for the retrofit of the towers between 1993 and about 2000 or so. So if you look at this, here we have the last of the eclipses. And this was November 13th. So we have the May 20th eclipse, which is the first alignment in 26,000 years of the sun, the moon, and the constellation of the Pleiades that have now activated the right-hand side of the brain, that now have pounded you with this ascension force, this ascension energy, a dynamic that is changing you on a cellular level now. And as we move forward, this eclipse of November 13th was an eclipse that went from the top of Australia, and by the way, this is right after a supermoon as well. It went from the top of Australia all the way across and could only be viewed from from one particular place, which was an island called, and some call it San Juan de Frisco, but others call it San Juan de Fernando. But they just replayed this special again on the History Channel called Apocalypse Island. Did anybody see this special? If anybody watches History 1, History 2, Discovery, I'm like Brian Seacrest on there. I've been all over that over the last couple of weeks. They've got Countdown to Apocalypse, The Four Horsemen I was on, Ancient Aliens I was on. So if you guys just flip on the History Channel, you'll see my handsome face. So right here, this is what's interesting, because these gouts of water coming out here actually created this massive flooding. This whole glyph talks about what's going to happen in this year. And it's just very unusual, but that's exactly what's happening. Many people blamed Hurricane Sandy for, the re-election of Obama. And again, people said, and I had to eat a lot of crow on that, because I thought, I literally did think that Romney was going to win the election. I thought it was going to be a big fight. I thought it was going to be a big challenge to it. But I was wrong. And bottom line is that I should have gone with my first instincts, because what I saw happening was the United States in revolt. I saw revolution. I saw states seceding. If you go on the WhiteHouse.gov website, there is now a petition on the website that says, who would like to secede from the United States? Have you seen this petition? Now, I started talking about this on my radio program, and when I hit the website, there were 350,000 people. Never in history has this happened, by the way. In other words, nobody wanted to secede from the Union after Clinton. Nobody wanted to secede from the Union after Bush. Nobody wanted to secede after Clinton got reelected. But now, you're literally having people actually seriously talking about seceding from the federal government. 350,000 people have actually signed it, and I think I started announcing it on my radio show, but it's up to almost 500,000 now. So you might want to take a look at it. Of course, that's right next to the petition. It tells you who signed the petition. That is right next to the petition on the White House website. Should Barack Obama nationalize as a national treasure and continue to support the Hostess snack cake company and save Twinkies, O's, and Ding Dongs? So that gives you an idea as to who's working their computers like this. And of course, it leaves Doritos and Cheetos completely. I would buy stock in Doritos right now, because if stoners don't have cupcakes and Twinkies.
No GMOs.
Yes, Miss Susan.
Didn't you talk about some kind of secret saving symbol or something that had to do with when he did his oath of office or something? It was about storms.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness, yes. This is very interesting. Okay, so, anybody know, okay, if you're familiar with Sabian symbols, there's sort of an arcane, really fun and interesting thing. If you want to take a look at something really amusing, and I think very, very interesting. A man by the name of Dane Rudger wrote a book called Sabian Symbols. Has anybody ever heard of Sabian symbols in the Zodiac? Like I said, it's a very arcane section of astrology. But if you take a look at your sun sign, and if you get a copy of this book, Dane Rudger, it's kind of channeled information, and a lot of people say, well, he just got stoned and made it up in his car. But it's really interesting. And what he does is that for all 360 degrees of the zodiac, each one of these symbols of the zodiac, he's come up with like a tarot card, if you will, like a symbol for each degree of the zodiac. And in the case of Barack Obama, for his first inauguration, when he goofed up the oath, you guys remember this? Now, this is going to be very interesting to see, because on January 20th, how is he going to take the oath of office again? Now, this is because I wrote an article about this about a month in advance, saying to watch the inauguration of Obama, that there is no way that he as a non-citizen is going to be able to actually take the oath of office, and they will find a way to screw it up. Because you have to take the Article 2, Section 3 oath of the presidential oath. Now, to give you an idea of how important it is that you say it exactly the way it's written in the Constitution, the female federal judge, the lady federal judge, who was on the plane on Air Force One after Kennedy was shot, said to Lyndon Johnson, "I'm so sorry, I can't swear you in as President of the United States. I don't have a copy of the oath or the Constitution with me for me to read you the oath." And Lyndon Johnson reached into his coat pocket and pulled it out and said, "I got it right here for you, man," and handed it to her. And that's the photo that you then see of him taking the oath in the plane with Jackie doing this and the woman swearing him in, he pulled it out of his pocket so she could say the oath exactly correctly because he knew he was ready to go. He was all ready to go. So it's important that you take the oath that way. Now here's what's interesting. The date that he took the oath on January 20th, the sun was at 30 degrees Capricorn at that time, and the first oath, the salient symbol for the oath was a Spanish mission in California. And the idea of it was that he was going to bring civility, clarity, all that hokey changey stuff he promised that you never got. Somebody had to tell him his campaign slogan was winning the future, and somebody had to tell him that the initials for that were WTF. And instead it just became forward, and of course now we've got the fiscal cliff coming up, so it's forward as in off the fiscal cliff, so a lot of interesting things. But the first salient symbol was that he would have a civilizing effect on the electorate, that he would bring peace, that he would be like a messianic figure in a savage land that would civilize Washington. However, he took a second oath of office, and this is very interesting. He took a second oath of office the next day when when the sun was at 1 to 3 degrees Aquarius. And the salient symbol for the second oath was massive storms come and destroy the works of all mankind. And that would be the symbol for his presidency. And by the way, the symbol for the Bush presidency was 29 degrees Capricorn, actually, when he took the oath. And the symbol for his presidency was a secretive star chamber of men plot war behind the scenes. Wow. That was the symbol. Now, I printed all this stuff in my newsletter like years before all this happened, and showing you that these are the symbols that happened. Now, it's interesting because I actually looked up my sun. I'm not sure if I told you this, Susan, but I looked up my degree. I think I've got, my sun I'm born October 1st, so my sun is like 8 degrees Libra. And I looked at my salient symbol, and my salient symbol is a professor looks disgustingly over his glasses in his ignorant class. That's what I say. And you're not ignorant, you're all
Mine is a trunk full of books.
A trunk full of books, of course. With wheels on it, of course. With wheels on it, right? Are you serious? You drive a trunk full of books. And that's exactly your symbol. It's weird. If you look up your salient symbol, it's really a lot of fun. So the only reason I'm going into this now is because November 13th, there's a whole special on the Discovery Channel called Apocalypse Island, where the greatest king of the Maya, I keep mispronouncing his name because I'm always corrected on this. Greatest king of the Maya, I'm so sorry, not Coquitlam Mo, but Coquitlam Mo was the 46-year king of the Mayans. Grandfather? No? Yes? Okay, I got it. Okay, so Coquitlam Mo, there we go. We never found his tomb. And now they found his tomb, they believe that they found his tomb on this island off the coast of Chile. And it's the only place on Earth where you can see the Venus transit on the 5th and 6th of June and the final eclipse on November 13th, where this great Maya king believed that if he could witness both of these in the afterlife, that he would return as the king of time. Sort of a, kind of a, Doctor Who, TARDIS-y sort of thing, I would think, but it's, but that's interesting that we've just gone through this eclipse, and everything that you see here, these demons, creating water on the sky dragon, and all this has actually occurred this year. So, let me progress forward here and show you a couple other things. So here's Chichen Itza. And by the way, okay, all right, here we go. Chichen Itza, one of the great monuments of the what they call the post-classical period. This city again was abandoned at the end of a backton. At the end of I think the 9th backton or so, they just left the city behind. But we are going here. We are actually going to be here. And we have a cruise, which I hope you all come on, but we're actually leaving from Galveston on December 17th, on the 17th. And this is what's interesting. We're going to be at Chichen Itza on the actual alignment. There's all these people that are telling you that the alignment is December 21st. Not exactly true. If you just look at an ephemeris, the sun actually aligns with 27 degrees Sagittarius, which is the exact center of the galaxy, on from 6 a.m. December 18th to approximately 6 a.m. December 19th. So everybody's telling you about the solstice of December 21st, but nobody just looked it up. And I just looked it up, and the sun is at 27 degrees Sagittarius, directly aligned with Black Hole Center on the 19th. Close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades, but we will be there on the 19th for this alignment. Now, the side of it, now from where this picture is being taken, there's two huge walls on another field that's about 200 yards away. And there's a ring that's about 60 feet up on a wall that's about 80 feet high. And the sun then aligns with that ring on this day, on the 18th and 19th. And that is when this calendar here, anyway, is supposedly the end of this great Factun. And we enter into the next world, which is the world of ether. So we're going to be there. We're on the cruise. Susan's here talking about it, but we'll be there. I think we're also going to we're going to Cozumel, which is fantastic. And where else are we going? We're going to be on the ship and going on. And we have speakers, and it's going to be a great deal. Now I've gone into a lot of this as well, talking about the different ages. I don't have time to talk about all the ages and everything.